Our scripture reading this morning is from John chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. If you were listening to the children's stories, this is going to sound a little familiar. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. May God bless these words to our understanding.
As Linda was reading the end of the story today, the old Irish Over song came to my mind. Wasn't that a party? Might have been the whiskey, might have been the gin, might have been the 3 or 4 six-packs, I don't know, but look at the mess I'm in. 150 gallons of wine might do that to a party. And normally when we talk about this story, I certainly, as far as I can remember, every time I've preached on the wedding at Cana, that's been the focus, is that incredible amount of wine. And I can understand where they were at halfway through the story, because I remember being at a weekend-long event, and on Saturday mid-afternoon, people started doing an inventory of how much alcohol they had left, and figuring out if they needed to make a run to the liquor store that afternoon to make it through till Sunday afternoon. They didn't, and they still made the run anyway. But that's a wonderful story of abundance. There's that wonderful story of saying, we don't have enough, we're running out. Oh, look. We have more than enough, and it's good stuff. The steward says to the bridegroom, normally you serve this stuff good first when people still have their tastes about them and their wits about them, and then when they're half cut, you give them the cheap stuff. You start with the good scotch, and then as the night goes on, you switch to the watered down stuff. Scotch drinkers will tell me you never switch to the watered down stuff. You always drink the good stuff. But there's a line at the beginning of the story that has always sort of caught my attention. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Now, there's been a lot of discussion, guessing, trying to fill in the blanks over the years as to why Mary is so concerned that they have no wine. Is it a family wedding? It was suggested in Bible study on Tuesday that maybe Mary has been helping in the kitchen. And so Mary knows they're running out of wine. In the same way that sometimes people helping in the kitchen at the church supper say, "Oh, the gravy is almost gone." Or the pickles. "Oh, we need to refill the pickles." There's people here who I've heard saying similar things. But why does Mary worry about the wine? Why is she in the know? Is the word spreading across the whole gathering, or is it still just an inner core who know they're about to run out of wine? And in the first century Palestine, weddings were not a one-night thing. A wedding celebration took place over a couple of days. And for the host to run out of supplies partway through the celebration, well, it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good thing. So somehow Mary is in the know, and she's trying to avoid a social calamity. They're out of wine. What are you going to do about it? Well, that's not my problem. I'm here to have a good time. Not my problem. Not my time. Leave me alone. I may have been filling in a few words. But Jesus is not ready to step up and do anything about the fact that there's no wine because he doesn't see it as his problem. Not my problem. I have a vision that we skip a portion of the story in there. I have a vision that we skip a portion of the story, that there's more of a discussion between Mary and Jesus. That there's more of a discussion about go do something. No, it's not my... Go. Any parent of a teenager would probably recognize this discussion. Go do something. No, it's not my time. And eventually, we join back in as John tells the story. And John says, Mary just turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you. Do whatever he tells you. I liked how Ralph Milton put it in his version of the story. After a little while, Jesus sighed. Well, all right, I guess I can help. Sometimes we only take on ministry because somebody steps up and says, you can do this. You should do this. Sometimes we only take on a role in the community because the community or members of the community step up and say, we think you'd be good at that. That's the role I see Mary playing in this story. And I'm sure that's not why John's telling the story. John's telling the story to talk about that abundance and talk about this is the first miracle that Jesus performs. But it doesn't change the fact that it's in the story. That Jesus only acts because Mary steps up and says, do it. You can fix this problem. You can do something here. Many call stories, both in the church and outside the church that I've heard, whether it's in the person running for political office at any level, or the person who goes into ministry, or the person who agrees to coordinate the beef dinner or the garage sale. They do it because somebody came up to them and said, I think you can do this. I think you can do this. That's a very important role in a community. That's a very important role in the community to keep the community functioning. Because we know none of us can do it all. We know that there's no one person in any community who can hold it all together by themselves. But we also know that scattered throughout the community are people with gifts that fit certain needs. And sometimes when we're the ones who the person goes up and says, have you ever thought you could do that? Our response is like Jesus says, no, it's not my problem. I'm busy. I think Jesus was there to have a good time with his friends. So sometimes that's our response. And sometimes our response is, no, there's no way I could do that. You got it wrong. That's not me. I don't have those skills. I don't have those gifts. And sometimes our response is, well, I'd really like to, but I just don't have the time. Or I'd really like to next year. Maybe in a few months. And what I've learned is that if the discussion stops there, I've also learned the discussion very rarely stops there, but if the discussion stops there, there's a chance of an opportunity missed. Now, as I said, very rarely in community life have I seen the discussion really stop there, because eventually somebody comes back and says, a few months ago we talked about. Or maybe they don't wait a few months. Maybe they wait a week. I think that often when the community says to its members, you can do this, not the general, we need somebody to. Communities have long learned that standing up in front of a room full of people saying, we need somebody to do this, yeah, that's about the amount of response you usually get. Communities have learned that you think of who the best person is. Not just the warm body who might be willing, but who's the best person? Who's got the gifts and skills we need for this task? And you go to that person and ask specifically, would you be interested? Mary knows that Jesus has the ability to do something about this wine problem. Do something, she says. And that's why I don't think the discussion is just as simple as John puts it out. I think the discussion has to have that inner portion that's skipped in the gospel. No, yes, no, yes. The community knows when we go to a person and we say, we think you can do this, and sometimes we push. And sometimes it's not the right time. And sometimes we do have to wait till retirement. Or we have to wait until our kids are grown. Or we have to wait until we finish this project. But the community needs to keep asking. And we as members of the community need to be ready to listen to the questions. Listen to the invitations. And ask ourselves, can I? Can I really do that? And maybe we won't say yes right away. Maybe we'll push back as long as we can. But maybe if we stop and listen, we'll recognize the voice of God. God calls us to many different things. God calls us to serve in our communities, to build up our communities in many different ways. Where our skills and our passions and our gifts meet the needs of the world, that's where God is calling us.